Good evening. I'm Councillor Terry O'Keefe, chairing the meeting this evening. I'd like to call this Committee of the Whole meeting of June 1st, 2026, 2026 to order. Joining me tonight are colleagues Councillor Novak, Mayor McNeil Smith, Councillor Rintoul, and to my right, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Garnett. And welcome to staff in chambers as well, and guests and members of the public. I'd next like to move to territorial acknowledgement, and I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting and the town of Sydney is on the unceded lands of the Saanich people who have lived here and been good stewards of these lands for millennia, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to live here and share these lands with them. A reminder that the Sydney Museum collaborated with the WSÁNEĆ elders and their knowledge keepers recently on the waterfront signage project. And one of the goals of that project was to convey the rich history and culture of the WSÁNEĆ people. And as I mentioned recently, those signs are now in place, and I encourage everyone to take the opportunity to view them and learn more about the WSÁNEĆ people. In turning to the approval of the agenda, there's a couple of changes to be made. We did get some correspondence late this afternoon from Mr. Woodland relating to item number 8B, the traffic calming. And I would also like to add to the agenda one item. I'll put it under number 9, other business, and that will just be an update on National Accessibility Awareness Week. And I'll look to committee to see if there's any other changes or additions. And if not, I'll seek a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, and Councillor Duck and Councillor Novak, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. Next, we'll move to approval of the minutes from our Committee of the Whole on May 19th. And I'll look to committee for a recommendation on those minutes. Councillor Duck. And Councillor Novak. All right, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Next, we'll move to public participation. So there's two parts of public participation tonight. There's our regular participation, which is limited to those things that are specifically on the Committee of the Whole agenda for tonight. And then there will be a separate public participation regarding the variance for the property on Lochside Drive. So I will call for a first time if there's anyone who would like to speak on general public participation. Please come forward and just state your name and what municipality you're from.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Wellborn. I am chair of Capital Bayside Peninsula Local Advocacy Committee, and I live in Sydney. I have a couple things to say tonight. First, it seems that the province has gotten the message in regards to the bicycle crossing at Beacon and the Highway. They've temporarily closed it, and from what I understand, there is some sort of solution coming. So the advocacy I was requesting last week, it seems to be no longer necessary. Hopefully they will also be fixing the tactile pads soon. I haven't heard anything about that. Secondly, I'd like to discuss the proposed traffic calming policy. Generally, I'm in favor of this, as these processes should have a policy to follow. I do have some concerns though. The threshold to accept, score, and then build any requested traffic calming is, in my mind, too high. From what I gather, places like Victoria, which were also mentioned in the report, don't have any such thresholds. Our numbers seem to be based on West Vancouver, so I contacted them to ask how it's going there. They went from 50 requests per year down to 8 in 2025 after they approved their traffic calming policy. 8 that met the petition requirement, but then none of those made it past the staff scoring stage. So none of the resident requests for traffic calming were approved under their new policy. For this reason, just last week on May 25th, their council reduced the minimum points for staff scoring in their policy to 40, from previously it was at 60, which is what's in our proposed policy. My preference would be for no petition requirements, but at the minimum I'd like to see them lowered so that more resident requests can be considered. I would also add to the list of options for traffic calming that daylighting of parking around intersections would be worth considering. And I'd also prefer to not see requests for calming of arterial roads completely denied. Maybe it could have a limited list of options for that instead of the full list, but I think there should be some options there for things such as curb bump outs and such. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. And I'll ask a second time if there's anyone who would like to speak at public participation. And third time. And yes? Yes, so only things that are on the agenda tonight, which is the transit plan, the transit hub, the calming, traffic calming, and the bench dedication. So, if you come to a council meeting, then you can bring up any sort of issue, but committee of the whole, it's limited to what's on the agenda. Okay, based on that, I will call public participation to a close, and we'll move along to presentations. So we'll have two presentations from representatives from BC Transit. The first one will be a update on the draft of Victoria Regional Transit Plan, and happy to welcome Mr. Meganbeer and also Elise Wren as well. Nice to see you again. Please proceed.
Excellent. Thank you so much to the chair and members of the committee for having me here this evening. Excited to provide an update on the draft Victoria Regional Transit Plan. Are we able to make this full screen? Perfect. So there's two key purposes for my presentation.
Are you able just to wait?
Sure, certainly. Thank you. Is it this button here? Down at the bottom? Oh no, it looks like it's the same.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. So two key goals for the presentation this evening. The first is really just to provide an update on the draft content in the 25-year plan update. And then beyond that, updating the big moves included within the plan, which is really the cornerstone of the plan. And really we're here to present for information and for feedback and input from Sydney prior to bringing it back to the Commission. So what is the Victoria Regional Transit Plan? This plan seeks to replace the original 2011 Transit Future Plan, really updating it to the significant changes we've seen within the region over the last 15 years. Beyond outlining that 25-year vision for the transit system, we're also developing some comprehensive network and route design guidelines that will provide a flexible framework for us to continue to evolve and develop the network over the next 25 years as the region continues to change. And then finally, really to guide infrastructure investment, including operations and maintenance facilities to allow additional bus expansion, but also significant investments to support rapid transit and other needs within the system. So this plan really does need to continue to grow with the region. We've seen significant changes over the last 15 years. We've seen a huge amount of development, particularly in the West Shore, but we have seen some in the core and on the peninsula as well, and really just want to make sure we're accounting for where the region's come over 15 years and where we know it's going to continue to evolve and grow over the subsequent 25 years. We've also seen significant changes in the policy landscape around transit over the last 5+ years, particularly with the province's bills 44 and 47. That's much more formally aligned transit and land use policy in a more fulsome way. And so making sure we're accounting for updated official community plans and all of the policy there. The CRD, of course, has launched their regional transportation service, and they're taking a larger role within the region from transportation. So we've been working very closely with the CRD. We need to continue to consider that partnership as it continues to grow and develop. And then finally, really aligning with our municipal partners across the region. we had the unique opportunity to develop this plan in alignment with each municipality updating their official community plans to support Bills 44 and 47, which was a great opportunity to talk about land use simultaneously as we're talking about transit and making sure that they're in alignment. Before we talk more about the specifics within this plan, I think there's value in just quickly reflecting on some of the accomplishments within the transit system over the last several years. So first of all, our electronic fare collection technology, UMO, was a big step forward. Of course, we very recently just launched the tap to pay with debit and credit 2 weeks ago, which was a huge step forward for the transit system. We launched our first rapid transit service between Victoria and the West Shore in 2023. We're now carrying over 11,000 rides per day on that service, which is exciting to see. Work continues on the Highway 1 rapid bus lanes. So the current section between Mackenzie and the West Shore should be wrapped up by fall of next year. The battery electric bus rollout continues. We have 25 buses in operation currently and more planned in the coming years. We just completed the Handy Dart facility in View Royal, which is really exciting. We're finally able to expand Handy Dart service for the first time in over 10 years, which is a huge win for the transit system. And then finally, with the province's kids 12 and under ride free policy, I believe that was 2021, we've seen that cohort of ridership continuing to grow. And so it's really great to see the next generation of transit riders getting on board and really utilizing the transit system. In terms of public engagement to support the process, we had our BC Transit's second largest public engagement process to date. We had almost 1,900 online survey responses, 350 people came out to speak to us in person at our open house events. We talked to 23 stakeholder groups, including community and residents associations, major employers, key institutions. And I would say most importantly, we engaged with local government staff at each of the municipalities multiple times through the process. Really just making sure that what we're proposing within the plan is aligning closely with local policy, particularly around the updated OCPs and transportation master plans. What were the key things we heard? Ultimately, the biggest feedback we received is more frequency, better, more reliable service. We heard a lot about rapid transit. I'd say about 80% of the open comments were, we want more rapid transit, we want it soon, as quickly as possible. And then finally, desire for simplified routes and direct connections within the transit network. I won't get into the network and route design guidelines in any great detail because there's a lot of complexity there. But as I mentioned, this is about guiding the transit network as it continues to grow and develop over time. What's the value for this? First of all, it allows, I would say, first of all, it's a demand-based framework for making service decisions. So it's really based on where we're going to see the highest return on ridership while still maintaining basic coverage. And then the second big piece is it provides clarity to the public, local governments, and BC Transit around, hey, if you develop a community of this type, this is the kind of service you can expect. So really about providing transparency and clarity. So that really brings us to the crux of the plan, which is the draft big moves. We have 10 of them within the draft plan. As you'll note, about 50% of them are rapid transit related, which aligns very closely with what we heard through engagement about the importance of continuing to invest in rapid transit. And two additional priorities are required to move some of those rapid transit initiatives forward. So that's the Uptown Mobility Hub and the 6 Mile Mobility Hub. So that's really 7 out of 10, which are really about pushing rapid transit forward within the region more quickly. Beyond rapid transit, one of the key initiatives is the delivery of the frequent transit network and modernizing the transit network. I'm going to provide a little more detail in a moment about that because there's quite a bit to unpack. Modernizing the Handy Dart system. So I'm not going to speak too much about that, but we have some improved technology that's going to improve the customer experience. We have expansion capacity now with the new Handy Dart facility. And then we're looking to align fare technology to provide ease of access between the two services, and then better inter-regional connections between Victoria and Upton and Nanaimo. So improving what currently exists and maybe looking at some reverse peak demand service at some point. So in terms of network modernization, what does this mean? The first piece is really about establishing a core frequent transit grid within the transit network. So you'll note in Sydney, there's a local frequent service sort of connecting into the future rapid transit spine on Highway 17. This is very close to what was in the 2022 Peninsula Local Area Transit Plan. There's additional services in the network and route design guidelines, including regional express services. So I think particularly for the peninsula, there's an opportunity to look at that as a stepping stone to full rapid bus. And then there's an opportunity to look at digital on-demand service, which is a new service type in rural or low-density areas within the region. And there's quite a few of the areas that could qualify for that on the peninsula. So that's something we could look at in the future as well. And then as well, there's an opportunity to look at the efficiency of the transit system. We have a lot of service duplication on key corridors. For example, we have over 20 routes on sections of Douglas Street. Is there an opportunity to spread the peanut butter a little more evenly across the bread and get frequent service in more corridors? Harmonizing stop spacing. So we have stops really close together on some major corridors. So there's an opportunity to make some minor adjustments, speed up and improve reliability of service. And then really continuing to work with our local governments on improving bus speed and reliability. There's some small interventions that can be done to speed up transit and allow us to provide more service with our existing resources. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is a big core component of the plan. Higher order rapid transit between downtown and the West Shore. What is higher order transit? Essentially means higher capacity vehicles than double deckers. So we're talking light rail transit or trackless trams. The plan will indicate the implementation of this higher order transit within the life cycle of the plan. And then the other rapid transit initiatives, so Mackenzie and Peninsula Rapid Transit, that hasn't changed significantly from the 2011 plan. I would just say some things specifically with respect to Peninsula. We will be speaking about a separate direct service to YYJ as part of the suite of services providing rapid transit to the peninsula. So that's one component. And the other piece is we're going to talk to a phased implementation approach. So there's the opportunity to consider regional express type service until we can hit that 10-minute all-day service threshold for something to qualify for full rapid bus service. Beyond that, we are building to that future rapid bus alignment along Highway 17. James Bay and Jubilee have been identified for longer-term rapid transit extensions at some point, pending further engagement with City of Victoria and engagement. And then I'll just indicate the Douglas Street bus lanes through downtown, which we're working with the city on. So in terms of Sydney's infrastructure, I think the key component, at least in the short term, is the Sydney Transit Hub, which my colleagues will speak to in greater detail. All I'll say today about that is it's really necessary for us to continue investing in transit to Sydney and across the peninsula. We are at capacity in Sydney and pretty much at Schwartz Bay as well. So until we're able to address some of those capacity constraints, there's very little we can do to improve service levels on the peninsula. It's anticipated that we'll see about 1,500 people using that facility on the first day when we open it up. So there's quite a few people within the area that we anticipate will be utilizing this infrastructure. And then the other key component is added park and ride facilities. So through previous studies, we've indicated a need for more park and ride to get people from lower density areas on the peninsula to access the core frequent and rapid spines on the peninsula. So before I talk about next steps, I just want to indicate this is a very ambitious plan. It's going to require a significant amount of investment, and it's going to require all parties across the region to look at transit in a different way. That's both the province in terms of coming to the table with more funding, BC Transit in terms of looking creatively at how we design and deliver services, and local governments about how you can support transit on your roadways to move more quickly and efficiently, and improving bus stop accessibility and infrastructure. So yeah, I just want to indicate this is a lofty vision, and we all do need to work together if we want to achieve the full outcome. In terms of next steps, we're in the process of presenting this draft plan to all municipalities in the region and the Capital Regional District. We're doing a final round of key stakeholder and rights holder engagement over the next week, and then we'll be presenting the draft plan to the Commission in July with any tweaks and adjustments we hear through this engagement. So with that, I want to thank you very much for having me here today, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's great. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll turn to colleagues to see if they have questions. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Understanding that obviously the very high populations on the West Shore are sensibly the higher demand, and we knowing that up here in the peninsula we might fall into the low density and rural area with the digital on demand, and that as we kind of start to have more demand up the peninsula, we could expand our service. Is that something that can fill the gaps that have already been identified in the meantime? As we're like, what is that service going to what would it do potentially for the people we hear from in West Sydney and the other side of the peninsula where bus service is lower?
Certainly. So through the chair, there's a kind of a couple components to that question, I think. Digital on demand, the easiest way of describing it is Uber for buses. So people will have an app on their phone and they can request a ride. And there's a digital interface on the back end that takes all the requests that come in and optimize where to pick people up and drop people off. And how it usually functions is there's a service area, a defined service area for people to travel within that area or to connect into the nearest transit exchange or rapid transit stop to get people elsewhere within the transit system. So once again, could be considered for a place like West Sydney, but I think there's also opportunities to consider how the network functions with conventional transit as well to improve service to West Sydney. There's a lot of ideas that have been discussed, and we just need to explore those opportunities and find expansion resources to accommodate that. I will just indicate in the 2 years after this plan is approved, we will be going through the process of looking at a network restructure, which potentially could allow us to, with limited expansion, achieve more objectives within our existing resource envelope by engaging with the public and really confirming like what those key things are and how we still manage to maintain access and coverage within the system as well. And that could include digital on demand. So stay tuned.
If I just may follow up, is that being used anywhere within the system right now, or is that something you would be looking at enabling?
Yeah, so currently we're piloting digital on demand service in Kelowna, Powell River, and Squamish.
Okay.
So we don't have it currently in operation within Victoria, which is great. We'll have all of the kinks worked out of it, and by the time we bring it to Victoria, hopefully it'll be a well-oiled service. But once again, I think what we heard through engagement was there's a bit of a mixed desire between digital on demand and low frequency conventional service. And I think what we took from that is we're not just going to spread digital on demand everywhere that's low density. We really need to engage with specific neighborhoods to say, hey, what would you prefer? Some limited fixed route service where you know when the bus is going to arrive versus this digital on demand service, which provides more flexibility, but you may not be able to secure your ride at a specific time to make a connection. So there's some trade-offs with the different services.
And Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation, and thank you for taking questions. My first one is around growing with the region. So just looking at for the peninsula and noting that from 2010 to 2021, the growth was 4,000 people, and then projecting out to 2045 of only an increase of 2,000. So that's approximately a 4.4% increase over 24 years, or about 83 people for the whole peninsula. I'm just wondering where the numbers are. Is there a source you use for the numbers, or just based on your own?
Yeah, through the chair, I'm reasonably certain this is some of the provincial health modeling data that's available. You can check it out on the internet. This stuff continues to evolve and change as demographic rates change and things get updated, but this is the most up-to-date information we were able to receive from those projections.
And
I will also say, though, that the growth in population on the peninsula is only one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
There's also the employment growth. We know there's some areas that are creating new employment opportunities, and then as well, I'd say interregional transportation demand growth, both from BC Ferries and from the airport, is likely going to continue to drive ridership growth and demand beyond what we're going to see from population growth. And I think there's a world where we can leverage the increase in demand from those areas to support improved service through the Sydney area in the future as well.
okay, so yeah, that was my next point, is that there is flexibility built in there if these projections are inaccurate and like considerably lower than what might occur. So there's, okay, perfect. My next question, and you talked about demand-based framework, and as somebody who lived in West Sydney and had to go into Victoria and had no bus service at 6 a.m, except for the exchange, the old one, that's kind of always been the chicken and egg. There has to be demand, but people won't use the service if there isn't there. So how do you, other than the thing you spoke to earlier, the digital on demand, how do you close that gap so that you actually get people to use the service? So if it's more frequent, like it's kind of a difficult scenario, but I'm just curious if you have a plan to get there, particularly in that area, because it's always been a problem in West Sydney.
Certainly. So I think in this case, with the Regional Express being a new service type that we can consider through future restructures, we indicate a phased approach to rapid bus implementation on the peninsula. So it's likely that some kind of interim solution could be a suite of Regional Express buses that provide a certain shared level of service frequency on a common corridor that can then branch out and serve different functions. And so, for example, West Sydney and the airport potentially could be one of those alignments. Up to the ferries could be another, and one that deviates in through Sydney could be another. Once again, we need to go through a more robust planning process to understand what opportunities there could be through future restructuring. But I think this new service type for the peninsula could create an opportunity to provide a service that more people potentially would use than with the current alignment, and better aligning more service frequency where we know there's the highest demand, and catering connections, the best connections where we're going to anticipate the highest demand.
Okay, and one last question, if I may, Chair. And this is just because this has kind of recently been in the news about the mechanics and drivers and the strike vote they take. And so I'm just curious with the, because it mentions current funding constraints exist with the consideration to service expansion. And clearly there'll be increased labor costs no matter how this resolution comes about. But also you have people that use the bus that don't necessarily have to use it, but people that do. So typically, if there's any kind of extended labor disruption, you're gonna see a potential drop in ridership upon renewed service because people will just find other options. So, given those potential cost constraints, do you see that having any impact on this long-term plan?
It's a multifaceted
It is a multifaceted question.
Sorry,
And it bridges between the two of us. Did you want to take it?
that's what I was aiming for.
In terms of ridership recovery?
Well, I think you should start with sort of.
Sure.
And then I can
Sure.
follow up.
Thank you for your question and through the chair. So yes, we have learned of Unifor 333, voted to authorize strike action. They haven't taken any immediate action as of yet, but that gives them the ability within 72 hours to strike, and that ability lasts for the next 90 days. So we're working on business continuity at the moment at BC Transit to ensure that we can do the best we can. And then also bargaining in good faith to ensure that our employees, but also our riders are not impacted as much as possible. We haven't had a strike in Victoria for many years, but because we are a provincial body, we do have had strikes recently. Cowichan Valley was our most recent one. And you're correct in that ridership does go down, especially the longer that the strike goes for. And then it does take a little while for us to see that recovery of ridership.
And I'd say the only thing I'll add to that is that the BC Transit model, the way it works is fare revenues directly offsets the local share of costs recovery for the transit service. So if we were to have an extended reduction in ridership, that we have a reserve fund that essentially can help us navigate some of those challenges where revenue may be down for a bit. And ultimately, because of the way the BC Transit model functions, we shouldn't see any reductions in service unless the commission decides, whoa, our expenses are getting a bit too high, we need to pull back a little bit. But that would not be a short-term decision.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Other colleagues? No? Okay. Oh, Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Full disclosure, I did see the presentation about a week ago at COD. And I might overlap with a couple of questions that I asked there, but my first question is on Regional Express versus Rapid Bus. You described Rapid Bus in terms of 10-minute service. If you could expand on that a little bit. And Regional Express, as I understand you're explaining it in response to a question, is more local rather than a full route?
Great question. So through the chair, the big difference between Regional Express and Rapid Transit has that minimum 10-minute all-day service. And right now on the peninsula, we have a much lower level of service than that. So it's going to take a lot of investment to get us up to 10-minute all-day service on the primary corridor. So I think the intention is with the regional express service not having that minimum service frequency. So we can start with something like 4 trips an hour, 15-minute service, build the ridership. And then as we can show that, yeah, this is growing ridership, the service is working better, then we can continue to invest to get us up to that full 10-minute all-day service in the future. So that's kind of what we refer to when we say a phased implementation plan for Rapid Bus on the peninsula.
Great, thanks for expanding on that. If I may continue, Chair, on the slide with the big moves, it shows the 2 mobility hubs, Uptown and 6 Mile, and then the new the hub in Sydney is being referred to as a transit hub. Can you describe some of the differences between what a transit hub in Sydney looks like and the mobility hubs elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. Through the chair, I'll do my best to answer it. I think in this particular context, we flagged those 2 facilities as a big move because they're much larger scale and scope in terms of supporting future, whether it be light rail or trackless trams. It's going to be probably a larger transit exchange facility. I think similar to Sydney, and my colleague will speak a little more in detail about that in the future, is incorporating all of those multimodal elements as well. So once again, the exact scope of those 2 projects hasn't been entirely nailed down, but I think the reason we're popping those out on this is, once again, they're really necessary to move forward that higher order future transit, which according to MOT's 2022 light rail transit study update, we need to be looking at seriously prior to 2050 because of the anticipated demand on the Douglas Street corridor.
Oh, thank you. In reference, you made reference to higher order transit on one of the slides, and you mentioned LRT and another mode, and I didn't just catch what that other mode was. I believe you said LRT and something else?
Yeah. So we're trying to be technology agnostic at this point in the process because there's more than one higher capacity type of transit that could be considered. So of course, most people are aware of what light rail transit is, or light rail trains. Trackless trams are something that's used extensively in China and has now been implemented in a couple of cities within Australia. And it's essentially, it looks like light rail trains, but they're on wheels. So it creates some additional flexibility. Some of the challenges we have is there's a lot more bus operations and maintenance facilities required to achieve the vision and investment trajectory here. And if we need another new facility for rail, that potentially increases expenses further. So we're just trying to explore more than one option right now to be flexible, recognizing that we just need to move more people more efficiently on the Douglas Street corridor as the minimum functional requirement for higher order transit.
Thank you. My last question, Chair, is around a question I asked in a version at the CRD, and that is you made reference in your presentation to since the last regional transportation plan was done, most if not all the municipalities have done their OCPs, and so what you're able to take into account now is the longer range planning of densities into the longer term planning. But of course there are shorter term increases in what I might call current density. And an example we have here in Sydney is just about a 1 kilometer stretch on Beacon Avenue West from the highway interchange to the traffic circle. We've seen a new hotel with 130 rooms. We have 2 rental buildings under construction that will be 180 units. We have another building, a 5-story building starting in the near future that'll be 140 units, I think it is, and there will be other increased density. We have a very significant employer, Amazon, at that traffic circle as well. Can you describe a little bit how you take into account current densities in your year-to-year planning versus this long-range plan?
Yeah, certainly. So as part of the long-range plan, we updated the frequent transit network and the rapid transit network based off those projected longer-term densities. Year over year, we've got to make strategic decisions about where to deploy limited expansion funding. And so we need to actually be assessing on a more regular basis every 5 years, for example, when the new census data comes out. And then even sooner if we can get intel from planning staff, for example, that there's significant changes in a particular area, where we can get the most value from those limited investments. And I think we're aware that there's some significant growth and development in the West Sydney area. We made some improvements to the 88 very recently as a first stepping stone to helping to improve service to that area. And I think, as I alluded to with the potential future regional express services, there's maybe further opportunities to reduce the number of connections required for people to get to and from there from other parts of the region. So yeah, we'll be continuing to assess as we get more census data and as we get more information from local government staff on developments. But we will have to take it as a phased development approach. And we do have a lot of demand for improved service across the region. So we just have to continue to assess year over year and move forward where we can.
No, that's great, thank you. I was, of course, using a local example, you know, in Sydney, of course, things like that are happening all over the region at any given time. And so thank you for expanding on that, and thank you for that increment in service in West Sydney that began at the beginning of January. Thanks again for the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I have a couple questions relating to Handy Dart. I think, as you know, we struggled with that last couple years through our accessibility committee. We heard about issues with trying to get rides, long waits on phone lines, that sort of thing. And it seems that there's been some improvement in talking to some people who are reliant on Handy Dart. I'm wondering if you could just chat a bit more on your plans. You mentioned in the report about modernization of Handy Dart. So what you've done so far, what's to come, and then also in terms of that modernization, where does Handy Dart rank in the scheme of priorities? As you just mentioned, there's a lot of people asking for increased service, lots on your plate. So curious about how Handy Dart ranks within all of that.
Certainly. So I will say, first of all, within the plan, the Handy Dart modernization involves a number of components. So the first is something that we're referring to as the custom transit solution, which is a technology to support the booking, registration, and trip allocation for Handy Dart that is intended to improve the customer experience, shorten wait times, and just generally improve the efficiency and effectiveness of Handy Dart. So that process is continuing to unfold. I don't have any further updates at this time other than to say that we're working on implementation for that very shortly. There's other components too. So within the Victoria Regional Transit Plan, one component is the development of service standards and performance guidelines for Handy Dart service. So I think that's really important because it allows us to better understand how the system's functioning against certain key performance indicators that will help us with identifying when and where more service investment is required. So for example, we have the two-week minimum booking window, for example, right now, which is like the far end, the maximum end we'd like to see that at. So being able to track how well we're performing helps us when it comes to every year looking at expansion planning. With respect to relative priority, we consider custom or Handy Dart service separately from conventional transit service. So we put in a request for expansion for both those services every year. So we're not necessarily saying, hey, we're just going to do conventional this year because it's more important. We're putting both of them forward every single year within our expansion planning process. And now that we have our Handy Dart facility, we finally can. So it's really, really exciting.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that, thank you, through you. We are trialing this custom transit solution in a different system in the province first, and then Victoria will be the second to get it. So they're just about to launch it in the other system, and then Victoria will be next. And so in terms of the big moves that you see on the screen, because we're almost there, it'll probably be the first thing that you see implemented in terms of those big moves.
Great, okay, thank you.
And the last thing I forgot to mention is fare integration, so that you could use UMO, for example, whether you're boarding a conventional or custom. So that's another thing that's being considered as part of Handy Dart modernization.
Great, thank you for that. All right, I don't see any other questions from colleagues on that, so thank you for that portion of the presentation. And we'll invite you to do your next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start with a thank you to the Committee of the Whole for the opportunity to return and speak with you again. As a reminder, my name is Severin Odland, and I'm the project manager for the Sydney Transit Hub. And I'd also like to start with a reminder that, again, this is still a planning and design project, so we are not yet committed to project delivery or construction. And what we're doing is all the preliminary planning and design work needed to get this project ready for when future funding does become available. And I'm here today to give you an update on some of the due diligence that we've been doing with Town of Sydney staff since the April 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. We've been working to investigate some of the potential design changes that the Committee of the Whole asked us to explore. And I'll be explaining some of those potential design changes that in the investigation and due diligence that we did to dig more into those, and also explain some of the rationale behind the design choices made at that revised 30% concept that I presented in April. This is just a very condensed version of the project background and context that I presented to you at that April meeting. And again, the purpose of the Transit Hub is to both create capacity to increase service in the town of Sydney and also across the peninsula, and to facilitate that connection with regional rapid bus. And just very briefly, again, this concept that we've arrived at today is a result of about 4 years of planning work beginning in 2022, where this location was identified. This is the initial concept here, pictured on the right, that was developed in 2024. That's the concept that we took and developed, ran it through a very robust public and stakeholder engagement process throughout 2025. And right now, we are in the planning and design work, where we took all that input that we heard from stakeholders in the public and revised that initial concept into this revised concept that I shared with you in April. And at that April meeting, the committee approved 3 motions, one of which was approval in principle of that revised concept. But during our discussion period, we heard some really good questions from you all on a few design changes that you'd like us to explore, including the potential to relocate some of the bus layover that was allocated on Bevan behind Save on Foods within Parking Lot E, the potential or feasibility of routing buses through Parking Lot E, more akin to that initial concept, as well as any opportunity or the feasibility of taking up more of Parking Lot E to increase space for amenities. And I'll be getting into all of those different potential design changes, but I also wanted to note a few of the tweaks that we also have made to our revised concept based on input that we heard from you all in April, namely the removal of that Beacon Avenue bus stop that several councilors expressed concern about, as well as a little bit more due diligence to distinguish the layover bays that we anticipate needing at opening day, if you will, after construction, as well as some bus layover bays that we anticipate needing on a more medium time horizon when service levels would increase. So I just want to flag for the committee that there may be advantage in delivering all of these bays as a part of one future construction project, but still retaining the on-street parking designations for those that we don't anticipate needing until service level increases would then justify their allocation to transit. But again, all of these designations are very preliminary, and we need to do more work to validate those. So moving into the potential design changes that you asked us to explore, one of the common denominators across all of them was looking at opportunities to concentrate and kind of centrally locate transit functions more closely around Parking Lot E. And I'd like to say at the outset that BC Transit definitely also aligns with that interest and the efficiencies both for pedestrians and our operators that would be presented by centrally locating functions around closer to parking lot E. But as we've gone through the design development process, we've uncovered or identified a number of challenges in terms of both bus turning movements, increased risk of vehicle and transit interactions, more complicated pedestrian movements, and a few other things that I'll explain in more detail. And we've prepared 3 alternative configurations of the transit hub that look each one into some of these different design choices. So this is the first one, and what we've been referring to as the stacked layover configuration, where you can see that we would be able to relocate all of those 3 Bevan Avenue bus layover spots within parking lot E in this kind of diagonal configuration. And just quickly, the light blue is meant to indicate concrete or pavers, light green for landscaping, dark blue for drop-off pickup bays, and then yellow for layover bays. This is a more zoomed in view, and we've added some transparent blue bars to approximate the turning movements that the buses would use to help you understand both how buses would circulate around this type of alternative configuration and also give you a sense of the amount of space that the buses need in order to make these turning movements. And so all of these alternative configurations present both advantages and challenges, of course. Again, the advantages here being those efficiencies of consolidating transit functions around parking lot E. But there's a number of challenges I'd like to draw your attention to, namely for this configuration, the challenges of those bus turning movements entering and exiting, specifically exiting on that southern end of parking lot E, are quite challenging. We would need to convert that laneway that connects the Save on Foods parking lot with parking lot E to one-way traffic only. And due to the need for buses to circulate around the hub, this would actually add traffic congestion to this intersection, whereas the revised concept doesn't add any new buses moving through the intersection. It only allows them to stop where they normally just pass through. Additionally, this configuration, although it is able to retain those Bevan layover bays, those Bevan on-street parking spots, there is a net loss in vehicle parking due to the inability to provide any within parking lot E, as well as there's no additional space for those passenger pickup or drop-off spots that we discussed in April, or the BC Hydro charging stations. The second alternative configuration is what we call the circular layover. And this is designed to kind of maximize the amount of space in parking lot E taken to provide ample space in the transit hub and the pedestrian plaza, what we've been calling it, to provide ample space for amenities and also relocate some of that layover from Bevan. As you can see, in this configuration, we would only be able to relocate 2 of those 3 Bevan spots within parking lot E. The turning movements are quite similar to the original to the stacked layover configuration. And so the advantages and challenges are generally similar. The advantages, again, of the centrally located transit functions does present some efficiencies that we like. But the challenges, again, specifically on the southern exit, that turning movement is quite difficult. And in addition to the challenges that are shared with Alternative 1, the expanded size of the pedestrian plaza would add, of course, to the construction and maintenance costs, to no clear benefit in terms of the amenities that we provide, as BC Transit is quite confident that the size and shape of the pedestrian plaza presented in April is more than sufficient for the amenities that we've been discussing, like secure bike parking, expanded transit shelters, a public washroom if that's desired, and so forth. And so then the last alternative configuration I have for you today is what we've been calling the hybrid, in the sense that it's a bit of a hybrid between that initial concept where buses were routed through parking lot E and the revised concept, so it still keeps that 7th Street bay for the rapid bus service. And again, this would allow us to relocate 1 of the 3 layover bays that are currently allocated or planned on Bevan. And but it also does allow the retention of some parking spots within parking lot E. So that's also an advantage. And similar to the first two alternative configurations, one of the most significant challenges, again, is in regards to how buses would exit parking lot E, but this time because they're routed northwards instead of circulating clockwise, the challenge would be at that northern entrance to parking lot E. In this configuration, that east-west laneway to the Save-On parking lot would have to be closed to personal vehicle use entirely. And it still is unclear how we could design that parking lot entrance to only allow northbound exit of transit while also still being able to accommodate the entrance of commercial vehicles to access those loading bays in the Beacon Plaza. Additionally, there are concerns around more complex pedestrian movements associated with this configuration. So this is just a summary table of all these options, and I'm happy to spend more time going into this in our discussion, but in summary, BC Transit is still quite confident that the design we presented in April is still the best way to utilize parking lot E and to best meet the needs of both transit and the public and stakeholder input that we received. And we look forward to continue working with you to advance that option and also to continue working with you to incorporate further input that you have to this design and to provide many of the amenities that we've been talking about and that we look forward to developing more as we move into 60% design. This is the same timeline I presented to you in April, but just to help us stay oriented that BC Transit anticipates using the most of 2026 to continue refining this design and collaborating both with yourselves and Town of Sydney staff in doing so to set us up for 2027 where we'll start to get those final approvals, start preparing business cases, seeking funding to set us up for a future construction project. And this just summarizes some of the next steps on how we intend to continue collaborating with yourselves and with Town of Sydney staff and our intention as directed in April to return at the 60% design milestone with amenity package and some of those things that we've discussed previously. So that's my presentation for you today, and I'm thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll look to colleagues. We'll start at the far end with Councillor Duck and then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just a couple things that are hard to visualize on the transit hub. What are the routings? I can see where the rapid bus comes off the highway, makes the turn and goes back onto the highway, but what about the other routes coming into that area? Like in particular, the 72, which is one of our primary routes that come through the town. The north and south access to that point, how do they work?
Do you want to take it?
So through the chair, happy to speak to this one. I will note that final reroutings would need to be conducted through a public engagement process and further planning. But at this time, the intention would be to reroute both local and regional routes to all converge in this area to ensure ease of transfers between different services and ensure regional and local connectivity for transit users. For the 72 in particular, we would be looking to reroute it via 7th Bevan, and then to get back to its current alignment along 5th. The exact details of that need to be reviewed in closer detail with local staff and then be taken out through public engagement before we can confirm final details. But the intention would be to ensure that we're converging those transit services to make easy connections between existing services.
Yeah, again, that would be essential. Certainly the southbound is going to be the challenge because you're having people cross Bevan to get all the way into town. And certainly the other part is that'll be a distinct difference from the current 72 service, which is at Bevan and Beacon and 5th. So that challenge there and servicing both those areas. Yeah, and I'd look forward to seeing that in one of the next renditions, but just to see how that traffic flow goes, because it would be important to our folks. If I may, I've got a couple more questions. The mention of the closing of the Save-On lane, do you have an indication which way you're going to close that to one-way traffic? One is to close it. The other is you mentioned closing it to one direction traffic only.
Yes, I think the intention would be to close it to allow exit only to reduce some of the congestion and movements of vehicles trying to turn in through that northern entrance. And again, depending on the which alternative configuration we're talking about, there was the third one, the hybrid, where it would need to be close to personal vehicles entirely. Whereas at this kind of configuration, that is something we're still talking about, but has not been identified as a requirement.
So, I mean, obviously that's a lot of re-education because that's a major access point and you're moving people but further down Bevan to access there or coming off Beacon. But the biggest impact would be for Coast Capital Savings. That's the direct access point and where everybody comes and goes through that entrance to get into their bank there.
Yes, that's one of the many reasons we identify that as a significant challenge to those alternative configurations, because you're correct, it would require either for completely changing how those employees access the parking lot or potentially additional changes to that 7th Street parking lot entrance. And those were some of the challenges that went into that kind of summary table.
Yeah. So yeah, certainly for consideration down the road. And the last was you mentioned about deliveries, because obviously commercial deliveries to both shoppers and the liquor store come in at that point, and hoping maintaining them because they do bring in fairly large vehicles for those deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Garnett, next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. And sort of building off, I think, what Councillor Rentoul had mentioned the last time you came. When you're looking at the revised concept, and I'm looking at number A here on the screen, I noticed in alternative 1 and 2, the bus is pulled further west, so there's actually 2 lanes on that one north going direction. Is it possible in this configuration to move that drop-off pickup bay more to the west? And it's something that I cited last time, the sight lines as people are leaving both the parking lot and the north portion and the lane, I could see being an issue. So is there a way to get that bus further over within this configuration to allow better sight lines?
Yes, absolutely. And clarification is that these blue bars are meant to be illustrative, and that already in some of the design work, even in the April concept that I shared with you, it was already tucked in a little bit more, and we're continuing to I kind of move it into that configuration. I'd also like to clarify that although it is 2 lanes on 7th north of that north parking lot entrance of the letter A, there is still they are not actually allowed to turn.
It's just the positioning of the bus for people actually exiting would be a challenge for the vehicles that are going in the through lane. My other one is, and I mentioned this before too, and I realize this is future bus capacity for the layover on the south portion of Bevan, between the downtown parking lot and our Mary Winspear. So do you envision a time where there will be 2 buses parked there at one time, or would there be one? Or again, it's about sightlines for me, for people exiting the downtown employee parking lot and Mary Winspear with the crosswalks and visibility for drivers. So if there's only 1 bus there, I wouldn't see it being an issue. But with the 2, the way it's presented here, if that happens in the future, then I could see that being a potential conflict with cars and other cars.
Thank you for that question. Again, those specific bay allocations, especially for those ones that we've identified as future, will need to go through its own kind of work with our service planning team and be validated through a more specific and detailed design process. But the sightline analysis is something that we factor into all of these designs that we're doing, and as we progress the design and refine them into more detail, so we do so also with the sightline analysis. So that's something that we've been that was included even in the 30% concept, and we continue to include as throughout part of the process.
Great, thank you. And I have one last question, Chair. And this is sort of based on the previous report, and I've touched on it before, but the mention of the current funding constraints exist with consideration to service expansion. So given all of that, and given the world we're living in, what is the real viability of this moving forward in a reasonable time frame?
Thank you for that question. I think like many of our projects, funding constraints are something that we're not, that we're used to. And so it really comes down to the project partners. Again, this would be cost shared between the Victoria Transit Commission and the Town of Sydney, BC Transit, and the province. And any kind of, I would not want to speculate, I guess on this.
Sorry for putting you in a difficult position, but
Through the chair, funding is never guaranteed for BC Transit. So really what we try to do here is try to get a plan that's shelf ready, that we call it, so that when funding does become available, we're ready to go. We're already out the gate to use that money.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have Councillor Rintoul next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate seeing you come back and having removed the bus bay off of Beacon. Councillor Garnett spoke with respect to bus bay A, and I agree it's still a bit of a concerned position there, but I think I heard you say this probably doesn't depict the ability to have that bus bay more inward into parking lot E than is depicted here, and I hope that's indeed the case. Refresh my memory though, coming off of Beacon onto Bevan, so from coming from the north, south there, the dark green bars appear to eliminate the left turn lane. That is the intent, correct? The left-hand turn lane is eliminated there, or it's not?
Thank you for that question. That third lane is eliminated, but the left turn is moved into that second lane, and the reason is because the buses need extra space to make those wide turns. Having the rapid bus make that turn from that third existing lane would be too tight. It would not be able to reach the transit hub. So we needed to move it over into that middle lane. And so then in order to reduce any kind of confusion or traffic conflicts, we're having two left turn lanes, one of which is a bus, and then there's cars turning within it. That's the rationale behind that design choice, to reduce that incoming Bevan access into those two lanes.
So where I see dark green is retained as a turning lane, but it's just you're anticipating vehicles using that lane, or what's happening?
The green is landscaping, so the left turn is being moved. It still is a turning movement, but it's in the middle lane instead of.
Yeah, I get that. So that the lane right now is becoming green space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mayor McNeil Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this presentation. Thanks to Councillor Rintoul for asking the question, because we really haven't talked about the more northern part or corner. And so in the map that was provided in the presentation in April, you showed three different routes through three different types of routes through the hub. One was the local routes, all of the 80s were shown in a green, and they go one way through the transit hub. And then Route 70 goes one way, coming off the highway through the hub and back onto the highway. And Route 72 is shown going through it, but Route 72 would be north and south going through the transit hub. And so it would, people would board, if they were coming south on 72, they would board across the street from where we see Bay A on that north corner.
Essentially, like one of those gray bays on the south would probably need to function as a bus stop, but not for layover in the initial, if we're going to accommodate the 72 change.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you're aware.
Yes, so this is one of the points of how exactly these bay designations that I mentioned would need to be validated and continue to be refined. And as my colleague just mentioned, that to your point, that one of those bays that is flagged for future layover would likely be a bus stop to service what you're saying. And so that is, again, one of the points where this is meant to be illustrative of the number of bays that you can expect to be used on opening day, but their specific assignments may still need to be shuffled.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I realize there's still further design to be done and so on, but Route 72 is the busiest one through Sydney, and it will be going north-south through the transit hub. So, you know, our riders, they're already starting to appreciate that it's gonna be moved off Beacon and Fifth to 7th and 5th. But then it comes through that point. Is that particular map that you provided on your project page? I'm sorry, I just didn't have an opportunity to go to it today.
No, it's not you mean on our engagement page? No, it's not. That was meant for illustrative purposes to communicate to you, but it has not been refined enough nor gone through that public engagement process enough to be shared in that context.
Oh, thank you. And last little question is the 2 crosswalks in the southern end, is that an either or a scenario? I mean, we do have the crosswalk on the north part of 7 and south part of 7, but the kind of the angle one, that would be, you're just considering options? Is that why there's 2 there?
Yeah, I appreciate your patience in dealing with these aerial concepts, because you can see that there's many layers stacked on top in terms of not only the crosswalks, but also the parking spot lines within parking lot E, and there's a few layers of drawings that we're sharing with you. And so they would not, the exact placement of the crosswalks is something that we'll be digging into that 60% design where we're getting into the specifics. There wouldn't be 2, but just exactly the placement has changed depending on which mock-up we're using the aerial image for.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anything else, colleagues? Yes, go ahead.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll just wait, because
Sure.
I just have one question.
Okay.
You mentioned that there would be, in regards to the routing, you heard some sort of comments, concerns about the 72 specifically, and you mentioned that there would be additional engagement on that. I presume that's with the public in Sydney. And what would the timeline, when would we expect to see that? I can't recall.
Yeah, so just some additional details there. Once we have the construction timeline locked in, we'll be able to develop more detailed scope timelines to finalize the route planning, and then to ensure we're going out to engagement to get feedback from the public before finalizing that. So until we know when the construction timeline is slated to wrap up, I can't share details about when that process is likely to happen, but we would be doing that in conjunction with this project to make sure that when it opens, that we've got the new routes approved, and also with input from the public here in Sydney.
Okay, so there would still be opportunity to make changes to the routing, depending on whatever the feedback you might get.
Correct.
Okay, that's great, thank you. All right, I think that's it. If there's a recommendation to be made.
Thank you, Chair. I would move part 1, that Council approve in principle the June 1st, 2026 revised concept plan for the Sydney Transit Hub as proposed on slide 5 of the BC Transit presentation, this one. And 2, that Council reaffirms approval in principle for the planning and design work to continue developing designs and cost estimates for the Sydney Transit Hub to support a business case and future funding application.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the
Yeah,
motion? Yes.
So thank you very much on a couple of fronts. One is for taking feedback, through the public engagement and through stakeholders, but also from presentations at council and working closely with our staff. We appreciate that there could be some further tweaks to this as it progresses, and the public will take an interest, as I indicated, and others, particularly with our busiest Route 72 in Sydney. So happy to see this go forward, and just note that we did make a 3rd recommendation with regards to amenities coming back as part of the 60% design, but no need to repeat that today because we've moved that at a previous meeting. So thank you very much.
Councillor Novak, anything for you to add?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I think it's valuable to see this going forward, and I would suggest in the next version because you'll start to engage the public more, that we start to demonstrate routings, potential routings, just to show where they are so they get a sense of feeling how their bus transit is going to work for them. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, committee, we'll move along next to item 7, which is development variance permit application at 9522 Lockside Drive. And I understand that Mr. Milne is here to make a presentation. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I don't particularly have a presentation to make. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. As a brief overview, we are looking for your consideration to advance a subdivision variance application that will allow us to continue to further the project. We have commenced pre-sales on the Phase 1 condominium component. 3 months ago, we submitted our building permit application for that and are working with staff through the building permit process for the works and services associated with the proposed Lot 1. And we are going to use the information that we obtain from the market in terms of what it is looking for in this very, very unique period in time that we are in to help inform what we would do with proposed Lot 2 as it relates to unit sizing and approach to that development. So at this time, we'd request your consideration to help us in advancing the first phase of the project, which will then enable us in the future to inform the future townhouse phase of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mill. I think we'll go to staff next to let them present their report, and then we'll have public participation and then questions from committee.
Good
Ms.
evening.
Verhagen.
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, this is a variance application to the subdivision and development bylaw, which we don't see as often as variances to the zoning bylaw, separate bylaw. So as the applicant indicated, they're looking to two variances to the bylaw. One to allow a longer extension to the preliminary letter of approval for the subdivision than the bylaw allows, and also to defer the requirement for designing and installing off-site improvements for Lot 2, which is the west half of the property. Before the subdivision is done, they'd like to defer that until the time that that property is developed. The report describes what these variances are and the implications of them. The first one, in terms of, would you like me to go through this, or have you all read the report? I'm happy to do either.
I think everyone has received the report,
Okay.
so
I'm
I
happy
think
to answer
maybe we'll
questions
just
then.
leave it,
Thank
you know, and then if committee has specific questions after public participation, we can pose those to you, if that works. Okay, thank you. So now we'll go to public participation. Nope, all right. First, second, third time? No? All right. So I declare public participation on this topic closed. I'll now open it up to committee if you have questions of the developer or of staff. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair, for both the applicant, Mr. Milne. Thank you for being here this evening. Just more around, like, tying into the timing around Lot 1 with Lot 2. Is the plan still to go ahead with what you were initially proposing in terms of units and on Lot 1?
On Lot 1, we've actually reduced the number of units from 49 to 46 homes as part of our further review of sort of market demand and unit sizing and what the market's looking for. And we want to inform Lot 2, which is intended to be a townhouse form, but the exact approach to that is not as firm as we are in Lot 1, where we actually submitted the building permit application to the town.
And all things being equal, considering market conditions, when were you, in a hopeful universe, when were you hoping to break ground for the development on Lot 1?
So the hope would be is that we're in a position to do that this fall. So right now our target would be in October is that we're able to commence. We've subsequently received we submitted our archaeological permits to the province back in March of 2025. And we've subsequently just received our further heritage inspection permit, and on the week of June 8th, we will be doing work on site with cultural monitoring from local First Nations in order to advance some of that further investigation work that is contingent upon the issuance of our heritage alteration permit.
Great, thank you. And I just have one question. Thank you very much. I just have one question of staff, and it's more along. I just wonder where this development falls with the extension in terms of where we might land with our DCC adoption, and would this development still be considered as not being part of that?
Sure, thank you. That's a good question. So there is legislation in the Local Government Act that protects in-stream applications like this one from paying new development cost charges. So it protects them for up to 1 year from the adoption date of that development cost charge bylaw. So yeah, they'd have to get the building permit issued before that 1 year time period lapses.
And we're still waiting for feedback, I think, from from the Ministry of.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Other colleagues? I see no other questions. I'll entertain a recommendation. Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I so move the recommendation that one, that owners and tenants in occupation of the property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 9522 Lochside Drive be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100390 to allow a longer extension to the preliminary letter of approval for the subdivision application, and to defer subdivision requirements for off-site improvements for the proposed Lot 2 until the time of development of Lot 2. And that any written correspondence received to be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance. And 2, that a condition of approval, that as of a condition of approval of development variance permit application number DV 100390, the property owner shall, prior to subdivision approval, register a covenant on title prohibiting any construction on Lot 2 until proof of payment to install underground electrical and telecommunication service is provided to the town.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move to item 8A, which is the update to the public bench dedication policy. And we'll look to Mr. Murphy to introduce that.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. So the first item is regarding the public bench dedication policy, and specifically for dedicated benches on the Bevan Fishing Pier. So the current policy, which was updated at least for pricing, was updated in 2016. Fortunately, that pricing, unlike many other pricing, actually still holds firm today. So there was enough rounding, if you will, in the policy cost versus the actual costs for a bench, so that we don't need to bring forward a recommendation to change the policy for dedicated benches elsewhere, but we would like to introduce a higher fee for specifically benches on the Bevan Fishing Pier, with the rationale being that first, those benches are more expensive to install to begin with, having metal legs and more wood and powder coating and those features, and then those benches specifically get a midlife refurbishment at about the 5-year point. So that's because they're sitting out there on the ocean. So whereas other benches do not need a midlife refurbishment. So recognizing actual costs for those benches, we're proposing this policy adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Yes, Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Just want to seek clarification. So it says there's 12 bench locations currently on the pier. So as of right now, the 6 are sponsored and 6 are not?
Through the chair, yes, my understanding is the furthest out 6 have been rededicated or dedicated or renewed recently, but the other 6 are up for renewal or dedication going forward.
Okay, so my second question, if I may, Chair, with regards to the community engagement of public, communication and public engagement, updates to the town's website and dedicated bench program materials, and then direct communication with interested parties at the time of inquiry or application. Given that this is $1,000 increase, and given the small number of people are actually 12 potential, I wonder if it might be in our interest, because this can be a sensitive issue for people. If and when we adopt this policy, we could send letters to these 12 or whoever needs to have them, just so that they have enough advance warning to know that what they might be facing in the future.
Through the chair, so certainly for so the furthest 6, my understanding is they're already dedicated, so they have 10 years plus or minus of runway ahead of them. But for the ones that are coming up for renewal, we do reach out to the current dedicator to give them the opportunity to renew before. So certainly, absolutely, we can inform them of the new fee when we reach out to those parties.
And I would suggest even the 6, if it's been recent, just because $1,000 may not seem like a lot, but for when you're dealing with something that's in a memorial for somebody, I think it's good to give people lots of leadway.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? All right, recommendation? Councillor Duck?
I so move the recommendation that policy WS-015, public bench dedication, be approved as amended, which includes introducing a new separate fee of $4,000 for dedicated benches located on the Bevan Fishing Pier, and maintaining the existing $3,000 fee for all other dedicated bench locations. And 2, that the updated policy apply to both new applications and renewals on the Bevan Fishing Pier. And 3, that staff be directed to bring forward an amendment to the town's fees and charges bylaw at an appropriate time to reflect the updated fee structure.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, we're getting to the end of it. Mr. Murphy, you're up again with traffic calming policy.
Good evening. So this item is to propose introducing a new traffic calming policy for the town. And it's intended to provide a pathway for residents to request and have considered a traffic calming request on their roadway. Currently, the approach is we receive individual requests to consider traffic calming, and for the most part, we will always look at the street to see if it should get extra consideration, but typically the response has to be, and because the requests are typically for speed humps, is that if we install a speed hump on this street, we have to install a speed hump on the next street and the next street and the next street. So that's why we're cautious and careful with where we install traffic calming for limited budget and long-term costs. And so at the same time, well, when we get an individual request, that represents one person's perspective. And on the same street, there very likely are others with the opposite perspective, and many in between. And so that's why the approach that we found that West Vancouver in particular has taken to include a minimum threshold of indication of support before a request is given more thorough review. And so the policy, as it's presented, includes a minimum threshold for indication of support, and that process is intended to be led by the residents themselves to collect enough indication of support to consider a traffic calming request. We can certainly discuss the threshold. I've been back and forth between 1/3 or 50%. There's no magic number, so we can certainly reduce the threshold if that's a concern. So once the threshold is met, then staff would undertake a formal review and scoring process for the request on that specific roadway, which would include looking at various factors such as traffic speeds and how traffic speeds relate to the posted speed limit. And what's the land use? Is there a school nearby? Are there indications of shortcutting? And aspects such as that, complete a scoring process, and traffic counts, and traffic volumes, and if the scoring meets a threshold, and again, that's another number that can be discussed for sure, then staff would review, and it would be staff who would recommend the specific traffic calming measure. So it may not be what the residents requested. They might have requested a speed hump. We might come back and say that bump outs are more appropriate, or some other measure. And then that would go back to all residents, again, with a higher threshold for agreement to implement the formal measure, because it is a permanent installation that's generally proposed. So that's generally what's outlined. There was some discussion. So yes, this policy is closest to the West Vancouver policy. Very interestingly, they did just 7 days ago change their scoring threshold, and so I've been looking at the report. So they've changed the scoring threshold from 60 points to 40 points. They did not change the initiation threshold. It's still, I believe, 50%. And the final approval threshold is still 67%. So the only change was the scoring threshold. And their rationale for that, it was not an extensive report. The rationale was that they had a number of projects that were close but didn't meet the threshold. And so our approach to that was going to be, and we can certainly add in some more words, it is mentioned in the policy, that scoring will include staff professional judgment. It's not meant to be rigid. And so again, we can add a few more words in to make that more clear. But staff, and my impression is that West Vancouver was probably living by a rigid, didn't make the 60 points on to the next item. Whereas we wouldn't be taking that approach. We'd be looking, are there other factors? Does staff judgment call for a higher score for some reason or another? So that's one way to deal with the scoring threshold. And really it comes down to, it's a principles question. So Victoria, for instance, their request form is literally back to an individual can request traffic calming on any street, anywhere. And they'll evaluate it. But Victoria, right on their website, says our approach to traffic calming is led by speed reduction. So is led by 30-kilometer speed limits. And so, and I can also guarantee that Victoria has more budget, more staff dedicated to traffic calming, and is more aggressive with the implementation of traffic calming. Saanich, for instance, their policy doesn't even speak to resident initiated. It just speaks to staff initiated. And Saanich says, we've adopted the policy, we have no budget. And that's right there on their website. So it's a principles question. It's a question of, do we want to be aggressive with traffic calming, or do we want to be pragmatic and only apply traffic calming where it really matters? And so this policy reflects that approach of saying we have limited budget, we can't put a speed hump on every street, and so we want to be sure that requests aren't we're not rushing out to install traffic calming because one resident has requested traffic calming. It needs to meet the needs of that immediate community, and then it needs to be prioritized to available budget. So those are the principles, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I'll look to staff. Councillor Duncan first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking in Appendix B, where we have stop signs are not considered traffic calming measure under this policy, which is good verbiage to have, because I knew that would be something residents would ask about. And I'm just wondering, because I think it's under the active transportation plan when we have pedestrian crossing signals, but that's something else people are constantly requesting, and particularly along arterials like Rest Haven. So can we clarify in this policy about how this, you know, these things that are not included because they're under the active transportation plan?
Through the chair, so certainly the policy is meant to be narrowed to resident-initiated traffic calming requests. And so nothing in this, and the policy does state this, is nothing precludes staff from initiating a traffic calming measure based on professional judgment. And that's where stop signs would fall into, is generally a staff analysis of do stop signs make sense. So certainly we can add some more words as to, yes, and the pedestrian activated crossing beacons, those are in the active transportation plan. So certainly we could add to a note or to the appendix that those items are addressed elsewhere.
Thank you. And I guess one more. So I was looking back to the letter where, and again, wondering when we have an issue where, say, one person has brought up something, and definitely distance to crosswalks where cars are parking or something, and we only get one letter, but staff evaluate it and they realize, oh, that is actually not up to current standards. We will fix that, you know, we can fix things like that without needing all of the residents to agree or say, yes, it's really a problem that it's not up to current standards or something like that, right?
Yeah, through the chair, so this is intended for something new, a new traffic calming measure. So absolutely, if someone wrote in and said, this doesn't appear to be right, something that's existing, then absolutely we take a look at that and evaluate that, and doesn't need to go through the entire process.
Or I guess not new, but rather over and above what's required by current regulations or policies or something like that. Because we currently have a standard for how much curb should be painted,
Yep.
you know, to stop traffic parking near a sidewalk or a crosswalk or something like that, or how fast people can go, or you know, bump outs or something. We currently have a standard, but things that people are requesting that are in addition to what is already in kind of provincial guidance or the other best practices we follow.
We will always look at the specific situation to see if there's a reason to go beyond the standards, but generally the standards are based on industry experience, and so we try to stick to the standards as much as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, looking at the neighborhood support survey, the 67% part of the process. So would that be a survey that would be mailed to all the homes in the affected area?
Through the chair, so yes, the initial survey support, the initial support indication, I know you're asking about the final support, the initial support indication would be led by a resident or a few residents, and would be part of the application form where they would indicate, here are the names who support this application. Staff can help define the extent, right, of the block or the area where this support should reasonably come from. The final support survey would be from that same area, and staff would mail letters directly to, such as we just did for the 3rd Street residential parking pilot.
And follow up, if I may, Chair. So given that context, because it doesn't mention it in the policy or the report, is there a time frame that we'd be expecting that we would allow for a response, given that we're looking for 67%?
Through the chair, so normally we allow approximately 3 weeks for a response.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking like hypotheticals,
Yep.
people away, but from personal experience with community mailbox delivery, people tend not to go there as often as they probably should. So, yeah, I just want to make sure there's enough time frame that people actually get the letter, have a chance to digest it, and then make a decision. So 3 weeks sounds about right, probably. So, I mean, I think you've got it on the ball. Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Councillor Novick?
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff, thank you for the report. I find this very interesting. But I'm curious, we already have quite a number of traffic calming measures in Sydney that have come to us over the years for various reasons. I presume some more acute than others. But I'm curious as to what has motivated the urgency, or if there is urgency, to get this on the table at this point in time. Is there pent-up demand? Is there a litany of requests for traffic calming measures in the town that we feel we need to formalize this process?
Through the chair, we do get requests, and they, as I said, as I described, they come from an individual or a household on a street saying there's speeding traffic on my street and I'd like a speed hump installed. And so currently the process is staff, I have to respond and say, you know, understand the concerns. Speeding is an issue on every street in every municipality, and traffic calming measures are expensive and have to be prioritized. And so ultimately it's not a very satisfying response, as indicated by the response I get back from the response I send. So partly the motivation is to provide a somewhat more satisfying response that says, if more than the individual, if the neighborhood can indicate interest in a traffic calming measure, we can look at it in more detail. But I can't make that pledge to every individual resident who writes in requesting traffic calming on their street. So it provides a more satisfying, a process, an opportunity to have the request have a second life more than what staff can respond. There's absolutely no criticality to bringing in this policy or not. We can continue on with the same current approach. But it is more defensible to have the formal scoring and the thresholds, but it's not critical. It just is something that seeing other communities bring in variations of this for that reason, is how do you measure one request against another and evaluate fairly and consistently without having to evaluate every single request that gets dropped in.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, Chair,
Sure.
if that's okay. So assuming that we get all this in place, what is your estimate of the time delay from the time that a traffic calming measure is first requested to, and assuming it meets all the criteria, to the time that it would get installed?
Through the chair, so I would estimate, so most residents won't be aware of the policy, so they'll write in with the usual request. And so once being made aware of the policy, I would estimate it would take at least a month to gather neighbor support for that initial application, if they're willing to take that on at all, right, as leading that charge. So I estimate take a month to get the initial support threshold, probably a month for staff to evaluate and score, and then a month for the final threshold, and then it's a matter of budget. So a project that meets all of the scoring and all of the thresholds still can't be implemented unless there is budget available. And so that's one of the caveats with this, is that we don't currently have a fund for traffic calming. We have funds for the active transportation plan, and so there are a few items that we can implement under that budget. But to do this properly, we would recommend an ongoing yearly amount, not a huge amount, 20,000, 30,000, that only gets spent as needed, But that's something we would bring forward for the next budget cycle. But so the policy is clear that a request may not be implemented in the same year that it's requested and evaluated, and it could take several budget cycles depending on how many projects are prioritized ahead of it and how much budget there is available. That said, I don't expect a large number of requests to make it through the process. So I would only expect 1 or 2 a year at most to actually make it through these thresholds and through the process.
Okay, thank you. That's great. And one more, if I may, Chair. So I see in the appendix to the policy, we have a whole series of traffic calming measures listed, which is great. There's some things which I never really thought of as being traffic calming measures that apparently are. So that's a good thing. But my question is, the policy is not going to actually be specific to any given measure, as I understand it. So somebody is going to request traffic calming measures for a particular location. And at the end of the day, it'll be up to staff to evaluate which of the, I don't know, there's 10 or 15 traffic calming measures that are listed here, including things like traffic circle, mini traffic circles, which I think are terrific because mini traffic circles solve a whole whack of problems, and they're relatively inexpensive to install, probably even less than the average traffic hump, in my understanding of things. So my question is, with all these options, and the need is going to be demonstrated somewhere, hopefully, how does staff actually choose which of the various traffic calming measures are appropriate for that particular situation?
Through the chair, so that analysis, which would be done through any staff-initiated interest in traffic calming, right, in looking at somewhere to install traffic calming. Staff would we evaluate the road context itself, its width, the traffic volumes, its usage, and anything else that's pre-existing in the area, and we just bring forward, using professional judgment, the best and cost, of course, the best proposal for that specific application. And so the reason that this analysis is left with staff is because most residents don't realize there are all these other options. And so as I described, usually the request is we need speed humps on our street. Well, there may be other approaches. And so the staff analysis would propose what we feel would be the best measure, and then that measure is what goes back as part of the final approval survey. And we can survey on more than one measure. If we're not sure, or if we think there's 2 viable options, we could say there's no restrictions on what we write in that letter, so to residents, so we can say, tell us your opinion, and would you approve speed humps? Would you approve a mini roundabout? And the votes can be separate and distinct on those. So we look at everything from, for instance, how close is it to the fire hall, right? We'll have different measures for something that's close and on a route that frequently sees fire trucks versus way down at the end of All Bay Road that might see a fire truck once in a blue moon. So different measures in different context and specific to the neighborhood context as well. And so, for instance, is there a crosswalk already? Well, that may be a great opportunity for a raised crosswalk versus speed humps, or it may be an opportunity for speed humps on both sides of the crosswalk, which is actually generally less expensive. So we look at all these variations.
Is there any kind of a book or an engineering standard that says
There is.
This type of
Yeah. There.
traffic calming solves this type of problem.
Yep. There is, I can't recall the formal name of it, but the TAC, which is the Transportation Advisory Committee, probably is a national advisory and industry working group that publishes guidelines and recommendations that we
Thank
would
you,
refer
Mr.
to.
Murphy.
Yep.
And I
I'm
think,
done.
I
Thank you,
think,
Chair.
great, thank you. Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Chair. Now just a couple of questions. One is a follow-up to Councillor Duncan's question regarding daylighting, and we heard it earlier in the BC Transit presentation, but also I know that's a concern with some some crosswalks that need more space or more daylighting, as I call it. I don't know if that's the right term, but I know, for example, the crosswalk at Breather and Fifth has always been a concern because of parking tight up against the, is that a traffic calming measure? What would be there in that case? Is that a bump out or something like that? Is what is considered there? And again, would that be by resident request?
Through the chair, so that's more of a traffic safety measure than traffic calming, but happy to add it into the appendix as a possible solution. Again, context specific and location specific. And very low cost, except for the demands on street parking.
Right, always. And where I see this policy coming forward is it's really about mid-block, not intersection based. It is about, you know, the intersection is more based on traffic signals and stop signs and that, where mid-block, it's how do we slow traffic down between those intersections?
Through the chair, primarily yes, but as Councillor Novak rightly pointed out, we do have many roundabouts listed, and those would go at intersections in residential areas. So primarily mid-block, but can be at intersections as well.
And what, in responding to that, what sort of numbers do you get in a year that you have to follow up on those single requests? If you could ballpark a number.
Through the chair, so comes in waves, comes randomly. It's not an overwhelming number. Average one a month, probably.
Okay. So we're looking at, you know, helping triage 12 to 20 responses a year and to give residents an indication of what the process is so that they get an idea of, you know, I'm not just throwing a letter in, something's going to happen, but sort of the process to it. And I think that's valuable to give the residents an idea of how they can get their cause moved to the top. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Other colleagues? Mayor McNeil Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. In the 3rd Street parking permit process, can staff, do staff recollect in a rough way what the response rate was?
Through the chair, so yes, there's the for and against response, and then there's the actual how many responded out of. And we were, while we hadn't established a minimum threshold, we were certainly looking for, there needs to be a reasonable amount of response. I believe it was in the 50-60% range of the letters we sent out.
Okay, so thank you. So the response rate, so you determined, I mean, there were boundaries to where the residential permit program is. And so you determined the number of residents those letters went out, and the response rate was about 50%, roughly. And so the determination is when we're talking about a percentage threshold, whether it's in initially or final approval, that's of all of the residents, not just the responses.
Through the chair, so in this case, the intent would be, and again, this is where we can work with the threshold if we're not comfortable, but the intent would be 67% of residences, right? So they would have to physically respond in support for it to meet that final threshold. And we can do a second round of letters and all that sort of thing, but it is a significant threshold. We did achieve it with the 3rd Street pilot, but at only 50 or 60% of the actual people who responded.
No, fair enough, thank you. I'm not gonna suggest an amendment. I mean, we don't have a motion on the floor yet, but I'm not asking this question to necessarily make an amendment. I have I have a proposal that if we're considering or requesting staff to make a couple of small changes to this, and staff indicated 1 or 2 that might be possible depending on where we go, is that we not actually make the amendment very specific tonight, but that we actually, if we have 2 or 3 points, is that we request staff bring it back to council meeting next week with those changes for us to consider at that time, so staff have some time to consider that. But I want to speak to a couple of those, so I'm speaking to a couple of points, but not seeking to make an amendment tonight. And that is, the first one is with regards to the threshold of 60 out of 100 points. So the wording is on page 4 of the policy itself. A minimum score of 60 out of 100 points is required for a location to be eligible for inclusion on the prioritized project list. Possible a change in wording that gives more latitude to, in your term, the professional judgment of staff, is that a score out of 60 out of 100 points is an important consideration for a location, something to that effect. And I think that gives a little more latitude. There's certainly still important scoring that occurs, but there's some latitude for staff in that. And the other is in terms of towards the back, or sorry, under Appendix B, it does have a note about stop signs are not considered a traffic calming measure, and then it indicates what process interested folks should follow. Do we get requests from residents for stop signs? We did on All Bay, but apart from...
Through the chair, yes. One in particular right now is, I believe, 5th and Malaview, especially with that new development there. And that is one that, even though it came from one individual or a couple of individuals, I've been chewing on it as it probably makes sense to have a 4-way stop there, because it's 2 connectors intersecting. So yes, we do get the odd request.
Okay, no, that's helpful. But a couple of others that have been mentioned was daylighting and are crosswalks themselves. So if there is no crosswalk, is crosswalk considered a traffic calming or a safety measure?
Through the chair, I would say a crosswalk would be a traffic safety measure that we would evaluate separately. And we do get requests for that as well. Mount Baker has been a recent one. Whether it's for, I'm not sure, it might be for the flashing lights more than a new crosswalk, but. Yeah.
And I think there have been requests as well for a second crosswalk at 5th and Malaview, even before the development went in there. So just a suggestion and open to colleagues is that I think you mentioned the possibility of a footnote or what have you that could refer to stop signs, crosswalks, and there was a third. Daylighting we were considering actually adding as within the appendix. Flashing lights, yes, flashing crosswalk lights. So there could just be a note that there are other processes. They're not considered traffic calming measures. There are other processes for consideration of those, and then the individual would reach out to the town to understand those. So I'll leave my comments there, and if there's any other discussion, and then maybe suggest a slightly different motion for staff to bring back.
Other colleagues, questions? No? Just a couple, I guess, questions from me, just clarifying my understanding, and maybe it will be clarified if we adopt more flexible wording. But my understand with the scoring criteria, the 60 out of 100, that it seemed to be staff's intention to be somewhat flexible on that and perhaps give more weight to certain things, even though it didn't necessarily meet the threshold, that was ultimately the intent.
To the chair, yes, that was the intent.
Okay.
And but given West Vancouver's move and the discussion tonight, and So a rewording and/or possibly considering a range and saying that scores within 40 to 60 will be further,
Right,
given
okay.
that final review.
Okay, and my other question had been similar to colleagues in terms of whether, once you reviewed whatever data came in, and you found that maybe traffic calming wasn't the appropriate measure, but you could have the latitude to say, well, maybe what we should be doing is adding a flashing light. And so it sounds like that is something that you think would be reasonable to be incorporated in some way. Okay.
To the chair, absolutely. Yes, we'll certainly look at the full suite of options. There, residents can always reapply in another cycle, intended to be if circumstances change. And so there are a few feedback loops on the flow chart that we intend to develop, and saying that, anyway, we can, if circumstances change or if we make a further decision, we can always revisit something that's been raised.
Okay, I'm just wanting to confirm in my mind that if they go through the process, in engineering's opinion, none of the traffic calming measures seem to be a fit, but you think a flashing light might be, they wouldn't necessarily have to reapply, that you would just go back to them and say, oh, we think that this would be a better way to address this safety issue.
Yes,
Okay.
and we would always provide closure to an application
Right.
explaining where it didn't meet the scoring or other reasons.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, looks like we're done with questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. I do have one more question, and that is speed limit reduction. Is that considered a traffic calming or safety measure? I know we're in another process,
Yeah.
significant process with regards to speed limits, but
Through the chair, so yes, have intentionally left speed limits in another process, and those bylaw amendments will be coming to either the next council meeting or the following one. And so it's both traffic calming and traffic safety, and that's where, as I was looking at Victoria's description, they say their traffic calming policy leads with speed limit reductions as the first measure.
okay, thank you. Chair, I'd like to put, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just sort of building on that then, I recognize wanting to keep the speed limit separate, but if we had wording in the policy that was generic enough, that, that staff may also consider other traffic safety solutions, then does that give you the flexibility to say, yeah, this might benefit from a combination of speed limit reduction and something else? And even though that I recognize that there's a separate process for that, and that's under a bylaw, that it would at least give you the latitude to say, yeah, we need to do that, and then, bring forward the relevant bylaw amendment.
To the chair, I think it would be appropriate to add something that says, as a result of this resident-initiated request, speed limit may be part of the review and may be presented to council as an option
Okay,
coming from the review.
great, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add regarding the speed limit piece as well, that the intention of this policy is to enable staff to be able to activate some traffic calming initiatives, and with speed limit changes, that does require a bylaw amendment, and so that does rest with council.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks for that. And I think all we were wanting is to give staff the flexibility, if in their opinion, when they review this, that they thought that a speed reduction might be an appropriate measure. even though it might not have been requested, that they would have the latitude to bring that forward to us if they saw fit. Okay, I think we're done now.
So, thank you for the alternate recommendation, and I'm gonna read it, but I'm not reading it in because I'm gonna amend what it says. So it says that staff be provided direction on any amendments prior to the policy being presented. So, I'm gonna suggest or word it, the motion that staff, consider, alternate wording for, minimum score thresholds, and other traffic calming, including other traffic calming measures and notes regarding non-traffic calming measures prior to the policy being presented to council for adoption. And 2, the staff bring forward a proposed dedicated traffic calming capital budget for council's consideration in the next annual budget cycle. If there's a seconder, thank you. And speaking to it. So I appreciate that while we have a council meeting a week from tonight, if staff needs more time than that, we would certainly understand if it was to come back to a council meeting after that. So it's not giving direction to a particular council meeting, but we leave that with staff. And just thank staff. I think it is good for our community, it's good for our municipal processes to have a policy like this, which helps provide guidance when we can get such a variety of requests from the public on either traffic calming or non-traffic calming measures. So I'll leave my comments there, Chair.
Councillor Guy?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it, as I mentioned in my questions, that it's a way to triage those requests and give some substantial weight to those ones that require more development and the ability for staff to manage that in a more sensible process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I think for me, the key word that Mr. Murphy mentioned was consistency, and I think that's important. I think that's what the community really looks to. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Other comments? I'll just, I'm in favor of this. In terms of, have we seen these requests before? Yeah, we have. So we had it on Old Bay. We've had them on Siddle Road. You know, Seawind Place is interested, Bowerbank. So, you know, and I think, you know, if we had a policy like this, it would have been, I think it would help kind of guide us and guide the neighborhood as well. So I think it's a good way to proceed. Anything else? Yes, Chair, or Mayor?
Sorry, I just saw staff indicate they might like a repeat of the wording that I suggested, which wasn't exact, but I'll try again. That staff consider alternate wording for minimum score thresholds, and so consider that and non-traffic and other traffic calming measures, including other traffic calming measures, and notes on non-traffic calming measures. And then it continues as worded in the agenda, prior to the policy being presented to council for adoption.
Okay, we've got that. Excellent. No further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, and that carries unanimously. Okay, just one more item for me under other business. I just wanted to remind council and the public that it is National Accessibility Week in Canada, and the town, along with Shoal Centre, is presenting a National Accessibility Awareness Day on Friday at the Shoal Centre. That will be Friday from 1 to 5, and I think it's going to be really interesting this year. So we're going to have 2 guests from Sydney who will be featured. The first one is Lee York which I believe some of you are familiar with. And he put together a film on his experience, and it's called Survival to Safari, the inspiring story of adventure after limb loss. So it's supposed to be an excellent film that he put together, so can look forward to that. And then Vanessa Pettinger, who had also been a member of our accessibility committee and lost her sight in her fairly early, I think late 20s, early 30s, and she will be doing a presentation on how to navigate the world with vision loss. So if you're available on Friday, there will be those presentations, and then also a number of tables and booths for information for people, organizations that support persons with disabilities. That's all for me. I think that's all on our agenda, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor? And we're done. Thank you.